I never thought betrayal would come, not from strangers, not from people I barely knew, but from the very ones whose love was supposed to be unconditional. I was 28, still finding my place in the world, still bruised from failures but fueled by dreams. That night, the night of the family dinner, I walked into my parents' house hoping for a shred of warmth, a small moment of connection. What I received instead shattered something inside me so completely that I can still hear the echo of their words. "You are not part of this family anymore, don't come back." The words hit like a slap across the face. I froze, fork suspended midair, unable to move. My mother's eyes were ice cold, sharp, unyielding. My father's expression was blank, as if this expulsion were simply another business transaction. My brother leaned back in his chair with a smug smile that made my stomach twist. Before I could even speak, they rose together, pointed to the door, and dismissed me like I was nothing. I stumbled into the cold Montana night, heart pounding, the lock clicking behind me. That sound, metal on metal, wasn't just the end of a dinner, it was the end of belonging. The key in my hand was suddenly worthless. I knocked, I begged, I shouted until my throat was raw. No one came. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was an intruder. I ended up in a dingy hotel room, my suitcase at my feet, my mind spinning. How could they? Why? I lay awake all night staring at the cracked ceiling, asking myself over and over what I had done wrong. Was it because I had refused to join their business? Was it because I dared to chase my dream of screenwriting when all they wanted was for me to serve the Blair family's empire? The rejection emails from producers had been painful, but nothing compared to the ridicule from my brother and the disdain from my parents. I had failed in their eyes, and that night they made it clear failure had no place at their table. For a week, I lived like a ghost. Cheap hotels, restless sleep, ramen noodles. My savings account, my one safety net, disappeared overnight. I learned Sean, my brother, had withdrawn the last $1,000 from the shared account we once kept for emergencies. He left me with nothing. I remember staring at the bank statement, my chest tight, my fingers shaking. The betrayal was so deliberate, so cruel, I could hardly breathe. And yet, in the middle of that devastation, an email came, a flicker of light in the darkness. It was from a lawyer named Robert Kane. His message was urgent, its subject line making my heart skip: Florence Walsh Trust. My grandmother. My sweet, stubborn, kind-hearted Grandma Florence. The one person who had ever believed in me. I opened the message and read words that made me cry harder than I had in years. She had left something for me, a trust, a lifeline. It guaranteed my right to live in the family home and funds to pursue my writing. She had seen this betrayal coming, and she had planned for it. I still remember the feel of her letter in my hands, her cursive script, steady even in her final years. My dearest Claire, it began. I've always known your heart belongs to your stories. This trust is my way of protecting you from those who don't understand. My mother, my father, my brother. She named them. She warned me that they would try to control me, but she also reminded me in her gentle but firm way that I was stronger than their doubts. Reading her words, I broke down completely, because in that moment I realized she had been the only one who truly saw me, not as a failure, not as a burden, but as someone worthy of love, of protection, of a future. She believed in my dream when everyone else laughed at it. But with that hope came anger, white-hot, undeniable. My parents had known about this trust. They had known, and still locked me out, still stole from me, still let my brother drain what little money I had left. They hadn't just rejected me, they had tried to erase me. When the day came to confront them, I felt like I was walking into a battlefield. The conference room was too bright, too sterile for the war that was about to take place. My mother sat across from me, her jaw tight. My father avoided my eyes, fiddling with his hands. Sean lounged back, arms crossed, smirk plastered on his face. I held Grandma Florence's letter in my trembling hands like a shield. The lawyer laid out the evidence. $150,000 siphoned from the trust. Unauthorized withdrawals. Documents showing the money funneled straight into Blair Events Company, the empire they worshipped more than their own child. When the lawyer said the words mismanagement of the trust, my mother scoffed, calling it absurd. But Sean's smirk faltered when the bank records appeared. I spoke then, my voice shaking but strong. You locked me out of my own home. You knew Grandma left me this protection and you still betrayed me. For the first time I saw my father's mask crack. We thought we were doing what was best for the family, he muttered. His voice was low, ashamed. But I snapped back through tears. No, you did what was best for yourselves. Sean lost control then. He slammed his hand on the table, shouting that I didn't deserve a dime, that I would waste it all on stupid scripts. His words echoed every insult, every taunt I had endured from him since I was a teenager. But instead of breaking me, they fueled me. I stood up, tears on my cheeks, but fire in my chest. I'm done. I want what Grandma left for me, the home, the funds, the freedom, and then I want nothing to do with you. My mother gasped as if I had stabbed her. My father hung his head. Sean's fury was the only sound left in the room, but the lawyer's voice cut through, calm and decisive. The trust is binding. Clare is entitled to the house and the remaining funds, and there will be an audit for the misappropriated amount. In that moment, I felt both triumphant and shattered. I had won. I had reclaimed what was mine. But the victory was soaked in grief. Because no legal document, no apartment, no bank account could replace the family I had lost. I walked out of that room lighter than I had in years, but with a hollow ache that still lingers even now. I left that conference room with my heart pounding in my chest, every step echoing like a drumbeat of both victory and grief. Outside, the world looked the same: cars driving by, people walking on sidewalks, the usual city noise, but I felt different. I clutched Grandma Florence's letter in my bag, like it was a lifeline, because in so many ways it was. She was gone, but she had reached across time to shield me. And yet, even with the lawyer's words still ringing in my ears, I couldn't shake the weight of loss. Winning meant I had the house. Winning meant I had money to breathe, to dream, to live again. But winning also meant I had seen my mother's eyes full of contempt, my father's face shrouded in shame, and my brother's hatred boil over in ways that would never be forgiven. I had gained freedom, but I had lost family. Or maybe, I told myself as I walked down the street, maybe they had lost me. That night, I returned to the home I had been locked out of. The door still looked the same, but when I slid the key into the lock, my hands trembled. For days, I had imagined walking back inside, claiming the space Grandma had promised me. But the moment it clicked open, I felt a sharp pang in my chest. The air smelled familiar, pine cleaner lavender, the faintest trace of my mother's perfume, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a battlefield. I had barely survived. I moved through the room slowly, my footsteps careful, as though the ghosts of betrayal lingered in the walls. My brother's old jacket hung on a chair. My mother's knitting basket sat by the sofa. My father's half-read newspaper rested on the table. They had left everything behind, as though daring me to erase them. I touched none of it. Instead, I walked upstairs to my old room, opened the door, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The posters from my teenage years were still taped to the walls. The desk where I had scribbled my first terrible scripts was still tucked beneath the window. My bed was neatly made, the quilt Grandma had sewn for me folded at the foot. For the first time in days, I sat down and let the tears come, not of defeat this time, but of mourning. Mourning the years I had spent begging for love that was never freely given. Mourning the dream of a family that could have chosen me but never did. I spent the next few days cleaning not just dust and dirt but memories. Every corner of the house carried echoes of my parents' words, my brother's sneer. I boxed up their belongings one by one, setting aside what might be worth selling and burning what felt too heavy to keep. As the smoke curled from the fire pit out back, I imagined it carrying away years of hurt, years of invisibility. I kept Grandma's quilt, her photo albums, her books. Everything else I let go. It was in those days of solitude that I discovered the second part of her gift. Buried in her dresser drawer behind her jewelry box was a notebook. Its leather cover was worn, the pages yellowed, but her handwriting danced across every line. They were letters to me, dated across decades, little notes she had written but never sent. Claire, one entry read, "Today you showed me your story idea about a girl who grows wings. I know others may laugh, but I see your wings even now." Another page written just a year before she passed said, "I fear your parents will never understand you, but I need you to promise me you will not let their blindness dim your light. You were not born to be their shadow." I held that notebook against my chest, sobbing. It was as though she had been walking beside me all along, whispering truths I had needed to hear when the world grew too dark. And in those pages, I found a strength I hadn't known I possessed. Still, the world outside didn't pause for my healing. Words spread quickly among relatives and neighbors. They didn't see the trust, the fraud, the betrayal. They only saw the daughter who had taken her parents' house. Whispers followed me at the grocery store. Old friends hesitated to call. Some sent messages laced with judgment. "How could you do this to your family?" For a while I stayed silent. But silence had been my prison for too long. One evening I sat down at Grandma's desk and began to write, not a script, not a story, but my truth. I poured every memory onto the page the night at dinner, when they cast me out the empty hotel rooms, the lawyer's call, the fury in my brother's eyes, the letters from Grandma that had saved me. When I finished, the pages were damp with tears, but for the first time in years, I felt alive. Days turned into weeks, and slowly my routines formed again. I cooked meals in the kitchen that once echoed with my mother's criticisms. I slept in my bed without waking in terror of being locked out again. I watered Grandma's plants, determined to keep them alive as a living piece of her memory. And every night I wrote scripts, journal entries, letters I would never send. The house was no longer just a place of betrayal. It was becoming my sanctuary, brick by brick, word by word. But peace is fragile, and betrayal has a way of lingering long after the first wound. One night, as I walked home from the market, I found Sean leaning against the gate. His face was gaunt, his eyes bloodshot, his suit wrinkled. He looked nothing like the smug brother who had laughed while I was cast out. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice sharp, my keys clenched in my hand. He smirked weakly. "Just checking in on my little sister. Or should I say, the princess of Grandma's kingdom." His words dripped with bitterness, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked desperate. And for a fleeting second, I saw not the bully, not the thief, but the boy who once shared my toys and sneaked cookies with me when Mom wasn't looking. But then he spoke again, and the illusion shattered. "You should sign it over to me. You don't deserve this house. You never did." My hands trembled, but my voice was steady. "Leave Sean, you've taken enough from me." His eyes darkened. "You'll regret this." And then he was gone, disappearing into the night. I stood there for a long time, the cold seeping into my skin, the words replaying in my head. "You'll regret this." I didn't know what he meant, but I knew one thing: the war wasn't over. And deep down I was ready for it. The night after Sean appeared at my gate, I couldn't sleep. I tossed beneath Grandma's quilt, staring at the ceiling, listening for every creak and groan of the house, as if it might betray me again. His words echoed endlessly in my mind. "You'll regret this." It wasn't a simple threat. It was a promise, one that came wrapped in years of cruelty and entitlement. And for the first time I realized just how far my brother might go to reclaim what he thought belonged to him. I got up, padded barefoot through the house, and checked the locks twice over. I stood by the window watching the empty street, half expecting his car to roll up again. Nothing came, but the fear lingered like smoke after a fire. My sanctuary had turned back into a fortress, and I hated it. The next morning, I called Robert Kane, the lawyer who had handled Grandma's trust. I told him about Sean, about his words, about the look in his eyes. Robert listened quietly before speaking in that steady, measured tone of his. "He has no legal claim to the property or the funds, Claire. But entitlement isn't rational. He may try to intimidate you. Document everything. And if he trespasses again, call the police immediately." His words were meant to reassure me, but they only made the knot in my stomach tighten. Because Robert was right, Sean didn't need legal grounds. He just needed fury, and he had plenty of that. The days that followed were uneasy. Every time I stepped outside, I scanned the street. Every knock on the door made my heart race. Yet at the same time, I forced myself not to shrink. I went to my classes. I kept teaching young people about money, about independence. I watered Grandma's plants. I cooked her recipes. I even sat at her desk each night to write. If I let fear consume me, Sean would win without lifting a finger. And I couldn't give him that. Still, there were moments when my strength cracked. Like the night I received a message from a distant cousin on social media. Your brother says you tricked Grandma into leaving everything to you. He says you manipulated her when she was old. My hands shook so violently I dropped my phone. The lie was so grotesque, so vile, it nearly broke me. Sean wasn't just after my house, he was after my name, my reputation. I cried until my throat was raw, but then as I flipped through Grandma's notebook again, my eyes fell on one line she had written, "When they lie about you, Claire, remember this truth has a way of outlasting poison. Do not let their venom silence your voice." Her words felt like a hand on my shoulder. And in that moment I decided if Sean wanted war, I would not cower. I would fight not with his weapons of lies and intimidation, but with truth and resilience. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I returned home one evening to find the front gate ajar. My pulse quickened. Slowly I pushed the door open, and there, sprawled on the living room couch, was Sean. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sat on the table, papers scattered around him. My papers, my scripts. He had rifled through my desk. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice sharper than the fear clawing inside me. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot, his face unshaven. "Just checking on you," he slurred. "You think you're better than us now, living in her house, hiding behind her words." "This isn't your house," I snapped, "and you don't get to touch my things." He laughed bitterly, tossing one of my scripts onto the floor. "Pathetic. You'll never be a writer. You'll waste this money just like you waste everything." The fury in me rose so fast I thought I might explode. Years of his taunts, his smugness, his greed, it all crashed into me at once. "Get out, Sean," I said, my voice low, steady, dangerous. "This is the last time. Get out, or I swear I'll call the police." He sneered, but when I reached for my phone, something in my eyes must have convinced him. He stood swaying and muttered, "This isn't over." Then he staggered out the door, leaving the stench of alcohol and venom behind him. I locked the door, my hands trembling, and slid down against it, sobbing. I had stood up to him, yes, but the encounter rattled me to my core. Because I knew Sean. When he said it wasn't over, he meant it. The next morning, I filed a report at the police station. They couldn't arrest him just for breaking in, not without pressing charges, but they logged the incident. Robert Kane helped me secure a restraining order. It wasn't foolproof, but it was something. And for the first time, I felt the smallest measure of safety again. Yet Sean's shadow still loomed. Relatives kept calling, some begging me to make peace, others accusing me of tearing the family apart. My mother even left a voicemail, her voice trembling. "You've embarrassed us, Claire. Can't you just give your brother something? Why must you be so selfish?" Selfish. The word cut deep because it was the same one she had used my entire life. When I wanted to keep the allowance I had saved instead of giving it to Sean. When I wanted to apply to film school instead of business school. When I wanted to write instead of slave away for Blair events. To her, my entire existence outside their expectations was selfish. I deleted the voicemail. Because for the first time I refused to carry that label anymore. And then karma arrived. Not with fanfare, not with vengeance, but quietly, inevitably. One morning, a neighbor stopped me on the street. "Did you hear about your brother?" she asked, eyes wide. I braced myself. "What about him?" "He was arrested," she whispered. "Fraud. Something about embezzling money from Blair events. Everyone's talking about it." My knees nearly buckled. Arrested. Fraud. I hurried home and searched online, and there it was, his mugshot plastered across local news sites. Headlines screamed about missing funds, about clients swindled, about a man who had burned through his family's wealth and reputation. I stared at his photo, numb. The smugness was gone. The arrogance was gone. He looked small, broken, caught in the snare of his own greed. And though a part of me felt satisfaction, a bitter justice, I also felt grief. Because this was my brother, the boy I had once played with in the yard, the teenager who had snuck me candy under the table. He had become the very monster I had feared, and now the world saw it too. That night I sat on the porch with Grandma's notebook in my lap. I read her words again and again. Truth has a way of outlasting poison. She had been right. I didn't need to destroy Sean. He had destroyed himself. And in the ruins of his choices, I saw clearly I wasn't the failure, I wasn't the selfish one, I was the survivor. I looked up at the stars, the Montana sky vast and endless, and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma." In the days after Sean's arrest, the silence around me shifted. For so long, the whispers in town had painted me as the villain, the selfish daughter who had stolen her parents' house, the cold sister who abandoned family duty. But suddenly those same voices began to change. Neighbors who once turned their backs now looked at me with pity or with cautious respect. The gossip no longer framed me as the betrayer. It framed Sean as the fraud, the liar, the architect of his own downfall. But instead of relief, I felt hollow. Because vindication didn't erase the years of scars. It didn't erase the moment my parents pointed to the door and told me I had no home. It didn't erase the sting of my father's silence, or the venom in my mother's words, or the way Sean had drained my accounts without a second thought. Justice came, yes, but it came too late to heal the girl I had once been. Still, the practical world doesn't wait for emotions to catch up. Reporters called asking for statements about Sean. I refused them all. Distant relatives messaged me suddenly friendly again, trying to pry details. I left them unanswered. Even my mother reached out, her voice shaking on the phone, begging me to help save what's left of the family's name. I laughed bitterly when I heard it. Save their name. After they had tried to erase mine, I hung up before she could finish. That night, sitting at Grandma's desk, I opened my journal and wrote, "Their empire was built on lies, but my life will not be. I will not be their savior, their scapegoat, or their shadow. I will be myself even if I stand alone." But I wasn't alone, not completely. Clara, my grandmother's sister, came to visit. She was old and frail, her steps slow, but her eyes still glimmered with sharp wisdom. When she settled into the armchair, she reached for my hand. "You remind me so much of Florence," she said softly. "Stubborn? Yes. But strong. She knew this day would come. That's why she fought so hard to protect you." Tears pricked my eyes. I don't know what to do now. Everyone sees me differently, but I still feel broken inside. Clara squeezed my hand. "Broken things can still hold beauty. You don't heal by pretending it never happened. You heal by building something new on top of the ruins." Her words settled deep in me. That night I lay awake thinking of Grandma, of Clara, of all the women in my family who had been silenced or overshadowed by men who thought they held the power. And I realized I had a choice. I could let the betrayal define me forever, or I could turn it into fuel for something greater. So I started small. I invited a few friends over, people who had quietly supported me even when the town whispered. We shared food, laughter, stories. For the first time in months, my house rang with warmth instead of accusations. It wasn't the family I had been born into, but it was the family I was choosing. At the same time, I threw myself deeper into writing. With Grandma's notebook beside me, I penned scripts not just about betrayal, but about survival, resilience, and hope. Each page was like stitching together a wound, weaving pain into purpose. And when one of those scripts won a small competition, earning me my first real recognition as a writer, I wept. Not because it solved everything, but because it proved that Grandma had been right to believe in me. Still, I couldn't ignore the shadows completely. Months later, I received a letter from prison. The handwriting was unmistakable Sean's. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Clare," it began, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I see it now. I see what I became. I blamed you because it was easier than facing myself. I don't know if I'll ever change, but I needed to say this. You were right. You were always right." I stared at the words, my chest tight. For years, I had dreamed of hearing Sean admit he was wrong. And now that it was in front of me, it didn't bring triumph. It brought tears. Because buried beneath his cruelty, his arrogance, his greed, there had once been a brother. And though I couldn't forget the harm he had done, I could grieve the boy he might have been. I folded the letter and tucked it away, not as a treasure, not as an absolution, but as a reminder that even those who hurt us are human. That sometimes the greatest revenge is simply refusing to let their darkness swallow us whole. Seasons passed. The house grew lighter. With each change I made fresh paint, blooming flowers, shelves lined with books and scripts. It no longer felt like the battlefield of betrayal. It felt like mine. A home reclaimed not because they allowed it, but because I chose it. And though I still carry the scars of that night of those words, "You have no home here," I know now that they were wrong. I have a home, I have a voice, I have a life that belongs to me. If you've made it this far, maybe you've known betrayal too. Maybe you've been cast out by the very people who were supposed to love you. If so, I hope my story reminds you of this: you are not defined by their rejection. You are defined by the strength it takes to rise again. So if this story resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to my channel for more stories like mine. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been betrayed by your own family? And how did you find your way back to yourself? Because healing isn't about erasing the pain, it's about refusing to let it own you.